Good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're very well. You're listening to Autistic Voices on UK Health Radio. I'm Evalynne Charmer. I'm a paediatric therapist and I'm the director of EdElf Child Therapy Limited and its sister training company for therapists, the Child Hypnotherapy Institute. And I've recently been diagnosed autistic myself. So I'm very inspired to bring you a diverse and rich range of autistic voices from the community. People who are diagnosed, people who are not diagnosed, people who work alongside and collaborate with autistic families or autistic adults, people who identify as neurodivergent. Please come and join the conversation. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at Evalynne, that's EVALYNNE, at childhypnotherapyinstitute.com or contact me via the show. Thank you for joining me with Autistic Voices on UK Health Radio.
The station that makes you feel good.
Hello, my guest today is Simon Preston. He's autistic himself. He's an autism advocate and a maths lead practitioner in a FE college in the Midlands. He's also a husband and a father. So welcome to the show, Simon.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. So was I right in your diagnosis that you were diagnosed autistic?
Yes, that's right. I'm diagnosed autistic and dyslexic.
And dyslexia. And they often go hand in hand, don't they?
Yes, they do.
And some people find that they also have ADHD and some people have dyspraxia. Some people have physical disabilities and all sorts of things.
Well, I had my actual diagnosis when I was 39 years old, but I'd say I'd started to explore the possibilities when I was around 37, following a bit of a burnout. And my GP recognised a lot of the traits I was displaying and the difficulties I was having, and that's what led to the path to diagnosis.
So you had a GP. Was he a specialist?
Yes, he was. He was actually a SEND specialist as well.
A SEND specialist, and that's really lucky.
Made a real difference, yes.
Yeah, because we know that you're going to unfold your story coming up, but there were some very valid reasons for your burnout, as you called it, and for you needing to seek medical advice in the first place.
I definitely think that having a SEND specialist GP does make a big difference. It may be the case that the traits and challenges I had might have come to the front in other forms. So, but I do think having a SEND specialist of a GP has been really, really good in terms of spotting the characteristics. So
you went off, you got your assessment, found out that you're autistic. Did you find out about the dyslexia at the same time, or was that something you already were aware of?
No, I was diagnosed with dyslexia in 2000, and so it was a college teacher that at the time when I was 20 at the time, and just before I started university, a college teacher recognised that I was having difficulties with comprehension and general reading challenges, and she recommended just exploring dyslexia a little bit more when I got to university. And so when I got to university, they did an assessment and got the local authority, to make an assessment, and discovered that I am dyslexic.
Yeah, and what was your initial reaction to both finding out that you have dyslexia and you're autistic?
Well, with dyslexia, I think it was such a long time ago, but I recall sort of feeling a little bit more at ease because there was an explanation as to why I was finding reading and comprehension difficult. So it was good to get the additional support for my studies at the university, which was good. But with the autism, it was a very different kind of relief, really, because it was after quite a prolonged period of time of having some personal difficulties, which I'm sure I'll talk about shortly. It was my actual first reaction to being diagnosed as autistic. It was I burst into tears because it was a relief. I realised that I wasn't a problem, and I subsequently realised that I actually am just another unique individual, just like everybody's unique individuals in the way they think. So I don't feel abnormal or anything now, and that was a huge relief. That was at the time.
Yeah, so there were happy tears.
Yes, very much.
Really, and the word validating keeps coming up in these interviews. So, did you feel any sense of validation through that diagnosis?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. It made a difference for me to sort of understand how life changed around, especially after my daughter's passing in 2010, and how life became very turbulent ever since then. And so when I did receive that diagnosis, it did feel very validating, and it did allow me to understand how I got to where I am, and also then, more importantly, how do I move forward?
So you've just brushed on your one of the core parts of your journey, I suppose, and you mentioned that in 2010 you lost your daughter. Her name was Bethany. So just before we talk about that, so the timeline was that Bethany died in 2010 and you were diagnosed autistic in 2019, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So there was a 9-year period of you finding life difficult, and before you met up with the SEND specialist who sent you for your assessment.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So first of all, really, really sorry to hear that you lost your daughter. I'm a parent myself, but even if I wasn't, I can't imagine anything worse than that as a person, as a human being.
It's the worst experience of my life. It really is. And it's true what they say is that unless you've gone through something like that, you never really know. And it certainly opened our eyes to the world and how fragile it can be, and not how you can't live life with the mindset of it might not happen to me, because something that is as rare as losing a child, doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's absolutely devastating. And life-changing.
Tell the listeners about Bethany and how old she was when she died.
Yeah, Bethany, she was only 3 years old when she died, but she was quite a character, to be honest. She would go out of her way quite a bit to make people smile and laugh, and it was just her personality was great. And an example would be when she was walking, when we went through a shopping aisle, and she was seeing lots of people just having arguments or just general negativity in the area, and then she'd just march up. She'd just look at me and the mother, and we would cringe straight away because we knew what she was going to do. And then she'd just march up the aisle singing, "I'd like to move it," while she's dancing. And so, and this is a really sort of comical little 3-year-old. So when she died and we had no other children at the time, it's always still very difficult to explain what that's like, but it's just smashed our world to smithereens.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I can imagine. It's actually really, really hard to imagine. It's your worst fear as a parent. And
yeah.
and you, I understand you found Bethany dead
Yes,
as well
I did.
yourself,
I did.
which must have been incredibly traumatic.
It was. And with what I now know about myself, I can now understand my reactions when I first found Bethany as well.
What were your reactions?
Well, I did. At first, it wasn't. I didn't panic. I just shut off all emotion effectively and tried to focus on bringing her back. So when I saw her lay down face first and she wasn't responding, and I turned her over, she had her eyes was rolled upwards, so you can only see the whites of her eyes, and she had pooling around her legs and things, and I knew something was wrong, and I had to I basically shouted to Colleen and my brother-in-law was there at the time to ring an ambulance, and I just focused on CPR and doing everything I can until paramedics arrived. And then when they arrived, I turned my attention to supporting my wife, and it wasn't until we got to the hospital and then we had the news that Bethany, they couldn't bring Bethany back. That's when the floodgates completely opened. But I used to think that because I was able to shut off my emotions, is that I just felt like for quite a period of time that I didn't. I blamed myself quite a bit and about her death, and as a father should protect her and things like that, and I went through time blaming myself quite a bit. And why didn't I panic when I saw Bethany? Why was it I was able to shut off emotions and things? And it wasn't until learning about being autistic that this was something that actually is something I'm able to do. But I did afterwards break down, and it was a terrible time.
Yeah, and who's to say how anyone will behave in that situation? Such a shock that it's not a surprise that you shut down emotionally and just dealt with trying to revive her and deal with your wife's trauma and all of that. So, but from what you're saying, you felt really guilty that you felt like that. Is that what you mean?
Did, yeah, I did. I felt guilty that I was able to just close off my emotions completely so quickly. But it was almost like I had a focus. I had not quite like a job to do, but I had a focus to bring her back.
Yeah, well, it wasn't your job at the time. You went into survival mode.
That's right. Yeah, that makes sense, because it was like a survival mode, and I was very focused to bring her back. And yeah, it's it didn't. The shock and everything didn't hit until we were told that they couldn't bring Bethany back, and it was even more amplified when we got home. And because this happened very early in the morning, about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. So when we got home from the hospital in the afternoon, and you could see Bethany's clothes are there ready for us to get her dressed and things, all that, and her not going to be coming home. That's when it really hit, and that's when emotions then became very overwhelming.
Thank you for talking about this. It's really important to talk about it. And I'm sure there are people out there listening who can either connect to your experience of being through something similar, or they're going through it right now, or they can, have the same fears around losing a child like that and totally relate. And it's really important that this is spoken about. And I don't believe it's spoken about enough. So it's really, really amazing of you to do that. What challenges, so between 2010 when Bethany died and being diagnosed in 2019, quite a long period of what was your life like? How did this trauma impact on your mental health, and how did you manage and cope as a family?
For the first year or so before our second daughter Sophie arrived, and it was that was a very challenging year, in the sense of, because we realised how fragile life is and how quick things can go wrong. we were expecting that things can still go wrong. And I think the two main areas that are in our life that was impacted on this was my jobs, and also friendships with people as well, because our friendships changed quite a bit, quite significantly. Because we found that people who normally speak with us that much, and so on, before Bethany's death, suddenly became very, very supportive and helped quite a bit. And people who we were classing as close friends kept the distance quite a bit, and which was very confusing to us. And our social circles did change quite drastically as a result. But in terms of my job role, because I felt guilty and I felt a failure as a father, I was very focused on trying to prove, not just to myself, but to everybody, that I'm not a failure. So I went seeking promotions and trying to raise people's awareness that I'm not a failure, that I can achieve things. But what I wasn't dealing with at the time was the actual grief. And subsequently, I ended up in depression, and I've been in depression ever since. And but what hasn't helped was that when I moved to a new job, you've got to start all over again with building professional relationships with people and so on. And my mindset at the time wasn't in a good place as it is. So when something goes wrong, I was getting paranoid about it. And then I would then just move on to another place, basically. And then I just got into this loop of starting off somewhere, doing really, really well with it. And then something just went wrong. And then I would move on, because I had it in my head that they're just going to fire me. They're just going to get rid of me because I've got this. It's difficult to explain it, but it is. I do feel it's trauma related to. Do
you know what? You're explaining it really well, and I think your experience is probably going to hit home to a lot of people who might be really going through a similar thing. And I think, it's okay for someone to say to you, "It's not your fault. You're not a failure." But how you feel in every fibre of your being is how you felt, and how you're saying that the depression hasn't left you, and so there's still a part of you that's there, in that trauma and in that crisis and in that loss, and trying to prove yourself to yourself and everybody else by seeking promotion, walking away when things don't go right. For anybody, I don't care what type of brain functioning, for absolutely anybody, I think is quite a normal, response to that level of trauma. And it's okay. Yeah. But doing that for such a long time, persistently, and trying to adapt to change all the time, like you said, starting afresh, new colleagues, new things to learn, new stuff to absorb, new processes, and all the while, probably a degree, may I, take the liberty of suggesting that there was probably a degree of you masking,
yes,
your mental health and how you were grieving and how you were feeling, maybe masking it from yourself, but certainly from all these new people you're constantly in communication with, and also masking sort of autistic traits that at that time you didn't even know.
Sure. It did feel quite a lot when going to new jobs and so on, is that I did have to do, when I look back on it, I had to do a lot of masking, because with being in positions of leadership as well, you've got to not sort of allow your emotions and things to get the better of you quite a bit. So, but because I hadn't dealt with the grief and actually grieve properly, has meant I had to work harder, quite a lot harder at it. And so whenever something happens, that sort of makes me feel threatened, which was I was feeling at the time. That's when then I start looking elsewhere in the hope that the next place will be better and so on. But it's actually proved to be very damaging to my career.
And also to your health, I imagine, physically and mentally. But it shows also a great amount of strength and resilience to be able to get out there and try something else, and get out there again and try something else again, and keep doing that. That takes a lot of, amazing set of skills and strengths and resilience, even though inside you probably didn't feel like that. It takes a lot to put yourself forward. It takes a lot to get a new job and to start something different and to walk in there with your head held high and be that leader that you want to be and that you feel you should be perceived as, when you had all of that internal stuff going on, and as a man trying to support your wife, and by then you had Sophie as well. It's no wonder that you ended up in what you described as your burnout.
Yeah. Yeah.
At what point did the burnout actually catch up with you?
The burnout hit me in 2018. Early 2018. So it was, it just got to a point where I could not really cope with the how do I describe it? It is like turmoil, the constant cycles. By that time, I'd been in a fair few jobs, and then it kind of reinforces my feelings of failure and things because of me moving on and perceiving it as giving up. And it was just, I wish I'd invested a lot more time at the beginning in the grieving.
Yes. In yourself, really.
Yeah. Because when Bethany died, you've got, it's like you have your whole life planned in front of you, and then that picture is completely smashed to little bits, and then trying to, because you're staring into a void at that point, so trying to sort of rebuild a picture, but Bethany's not there. It is very, very difficult. Yeah. And so I'm trying to also find the roles and the jobs that I can do, that I can go into, but it wasn't because of being so intensely focused on trying to prove people that I'm not a failure, and to myself more than anything, that I'm not a failure as a father, kind of really sort of took over.
Thank you. We're going to go to a break, and after the break, we're going to talk about what support you've accessed and still access, and what you think's been helpful.
Station that makes you feel good.
Apples and pears, beef and skittles, cider with Rosie, common or garden, ant and deck, fish and chips, mum and dad.
UK Health Radio and Health Triangle magazine. Each is good by itself, but enjoying both is always better.
Kiss me quick.
Add Health Triangle magazine to your monthly health regime. Check it out at ukhealthradio.com.
Strawberries and cream.
A cancer diagnosis can be scary and stressful for everyone involved. Hello Love is a contemporary living space and well-being center in central London where anyone can come and learn about illness prevention and non-toxic practice. Inside, you will find a vegan restaurant, juice bar, and holistic dojo that encourage lifestyle changes to help heal mind, body, and spirit connection. Cancer patients are offered free sessions. To find out more, please visit us at hellolove.org.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Hello, welcome back. You're listening to Evalynne Charmer on Autistic Voices. I have a very special guest today. I've been talking to Simon Preston about some of the challenges that he's faced in his life. He's been incredibly brave and honest in sharing that with us all. So thank you. Welcome back, Simon.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah, thank you very much. So are you okay to carry on?
Yes, yeah,
okay.
Certainly.
Brilliant. So before the break, obviously you were talking about the sort of build up over many years after the trauma of your finding Bethany dead age 3, and how that impacted you as a man, how it impacted you as a human being, as a father, as an employee, as a leader, and how you wished you'd invested in your own grieving earlier on in the process. But who's to say, what's right when, you did what you had, you pulled on the resources you had, and you did what you could to keep going. And you kept going for a long time, about 8 years, before you actually kind of had nothing left and had to stop. That's how I see a breakdown. And to me, a breakdown is always a breakthrough as well, because I think it once a person completely shatters into a million pieces, the only option then is to start putting those pieces back together somehow, but you have to break for that to happen. And often what can happen when someone's grieving is that they hold on really tightly to being in one piece. It's a very scary situation to let go, and it sounds like it took you many, many years before you finally allowed yourself to break. Yeah. So what helped you in your recovery? I'm not going to patronize you and say that, you're over it and you're well now and you're not depressed. That's not what I mean. But in your path to where you've got to today.
Well, prior to that, I did have CBT to support me with the loss. And the first set of CPD was for post-traumatic stress disorder, and that was effective. That did work quite well because it helped me to process what happened on the day.
Yes,
and that helped quite a bit, because that actually did start to reduce flashbacks and things. So and it was a big step forward, that was. But when I had the CBT for depression, that wasn't as effective. It wasn't until we started to explore the possibility of being autistic at the time that CBT then stopped, because of actually we need to explore more around the autism first. I mean, I've had 2 burnouts. The first one was one that we just mentioned now, and that's what kind of led to the GP picking up when I was describing a lot of things that were going on and talking about my reactions, and just generally talking about the 8 years prior. And that's when he suggested, have you ever considered that you could be autistic? Because you are demonstrating a lot of the characteristics and the traits, and the way you're thinking can also be attributed as well. And I said, I've never thought of that before, but because I'm dyslexic, I wasn't overly surprised at the same time, but I'd never considered it. So I did a couple of these sort of screening surveys and things, and that came back quite high chances of being autistic. So that's when he referred me on. And then the process took about 2 years-ish to get to the diagnosis point. But I had the initial assessment with the psychologist, and they basically, which is a bit like a triage, forward it on, said definitely worth considering autism. So when I discovered, as opposed to found out, because it's not a bad thing, it's a discovery, isn't it? And I discovered that I'm autistic, and in the time leading up to that, I did a lot of research on it, listening to YouTube videos, and I'm just learning as much as I can about autism. And that's when I realized myself about the spiky profiles of autism, because it even challenged my own perceptions as well. And it's true what they say, isn't it, that when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And it was the first time in a very long time getting a bit more excited about it, because there was an explanation that I could sort of look back on and think, that makes sense now. That makes sense now. And then I can then start to sort of make changes that I can make. And things were improving as a result of it. And then the second burnout was as a result of the pandemic. and the sudden change to working with people in their physical presence to everybody behind a computer screen and talking to initials quite frequently. And after the first, it was about 2 months into the pandemic, it was, after lockdown, that's when I then went into a burnout. So then I started reflecting on that, and it is that sudden change, my usual ways of communicating with people, because I like to use my hands when I'm talking, and I like to doodle when I'm talking, and the usual things that I do, and drawing using diagrams to explain things I couldn't do, because at the time I wasn't skilled enough on technology. That led to another burnout, and that's when, like you were saying before, you start to think about, after a breakdown, it's a breakthrough, because that's when I decided to
that makes you feel good.
A cancer diagnosis can be scary and stressful for everyone involved. Hello Love is a contemporary living space and well-being center in central London where anyone can come and learn about illness prevention and non-toxic practice. Inside, you will find a vegan restaurant, juice bar, and holistic dojo that encourage lifestyle changes to help heal mind, body, and spirit connection. Cancer patients are offered free sessions. To find out more, please visit us at hellolove.org.
A for horses, B for mutton, C more cheeks, dig for victory, E by God.
UK Health Radio and Health Triangle magazine. Each is good by itself, but enjoying both is always better.
Marks and Spencer.
Add Health Triangle magazine to your monthly health regime. Check it out at ukhealthradio.com.
T for two.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Hello, I'm talking to Simon Preston. Welcome back, Simon. Just before the break, you mentioned that after your second breakdown, stroke breakthrough, you chose a different path altogether and you decided to study your MBA. And how was your experience of the previous 9 years and, finding out that you're autistic and going through PTSD and depression, trying different things like CBT, and then having the pandemic thrown at you, which made you question how you work with people and how what you need in order to do that and be comfortable. How's that changed the world for you? As in, what are you doing differently now in terms of your work and obviously your studying?
I think I'll always say this, but the decision to study an MBA is probably the best decision I've made in a very, very, very long time, because it's allowed me to focus onto an area that I'm quite passionate about. And utilising the experience I'd developed over that 9 years and prior to that, when I was in forms of leadership management. And so it was very much of in the second burnout, because at that point in time that I know I'm autistic, I was able to sort of think about it a little bit more, about what I found challenging and what can I do and what do I need to learn to do, and things like that. So whilst I was studying this MBA, because with an MBA, it's me and the degree, so I get out of it as much as I put into it. So it's not influenced by anybody else other than people that are trying to help me succeed in my lecturers, and I've got some fantastic lecturers, I really have, and they're even pushing me on to do a PhD now as well, which is what's quite nice.
Amazing. And what's this? Before you carry on, what is the MBA in?
The MBA is in educational leadership and management, but I'm specialising in the field of neurodiversity, and neurodiversity in the workplace, and how can working environments be more inclusive, and by taking the approach of the social model of inclusion. And what I'm focusing on at the moment in my dissertation is on how when an organisation embraces neurodiversity, that it can actually lead to benefits for everybody, the organisation, strategic advantage, and also for progression opportunities for neurodivergent staff too. So I'm looking at challenging the neurotypical systems and tried to widen the participation more to include neurodivergent people as well as neurotypicals. So embracing neurodiversity as a whole. So that's the direction that I'm going in, and it's been wonderful to sort of be able to actually consolidate the experience I've gained through my professional career, along with my personal experience of being somebody who's found being in neurotypical systems very difficult to be part of.
I just think that you're absolutely outstanding. And, what I absolutely love about your story is that despite, or even because of, in some respects, your horrendous experiences of trauma and losing a child and subsequently, going through what you went through, and you've just explained to us all. So honestly, it's had a profound impact on you wanting to help other people. And that's what you're doing fundamentally, is you're studying and you're putting it out there, and you're now advocating for people to have a much better, fulfilling experience of work and the workplace and education, which is something you struggled with yourself, even when you didn't realise you were struggling because of being autistic. So I can't commend you enough, Simon, for, not giving up on life, not giving up on being valuable in society. You've got how many more children now? So you had Sophie.
I've got two. We've got Sophie, and we have Phoenix now. He's 18 months, and he's a real character.
Phoenix, wonderful. 18 months. So you've not given up on anything, and what you have done is you've gone through the darkest experiences that anyone can imagine going through. But when you've come out the other side, you're bringing so much light with you to the world.
That's Bethany's inspiration, because that's who she was. And and she inspires us still even today. And when she, despite people might not be in a good place, she was always trying to make people happy and smile and make a difference to them. And so that's something that I've always carried forward with me. And although the time leading up to starting my MBA had been incredibly turbulent, that has been the pandemic itself has really sort of made me rethink on some things, and actually just doing and realizing that I'm not a failure, and I'm a unique individual, just like anybody else is a unique individual, and I need to spend the rest of my life doing what I feel I can do best. And so if I can make a difference to other autistic people's working life by contributing to the research and or supporting through coaching and things, then that's fantastic. And very much something I want to do.
Oh, it's just absolutely wonderful. And it's really ringing in my ears now that you said I'm not a failure at the end of our chat, because I think that's such an amazing circular journey that you've described, and it's amazing. I've got tears myself now of joy. To hear you say that is truly heartwarming, and I'm sure there are a few wet cheeks out in the world listening to this right now. So thank you so much. And we're going to wrap up, but before we do, is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, my daughter's has been diagnosed. She's 10 now, but she was diagnosed as autistic just a year ago. And just want a big shout out to a school, Woodfield Academy in Redditch, who have been absolutely fantastic in their making adjustments for her. And she was a school refuser for a period of time, but the adjustments that they made to reduce the trigger points for anxiety and things have been really, really good. And it has made a big difference. So I just want a big shout out really because it's not often that schools get a lot of good press, and for the work that the fantastic work that they do. And so I just felt it was important to sort of express my gratitude to them for what they've done for my daughter.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely 100%. So shout out to Woodfield Academy in Redditch for their wonderful work with Sophie, and I'm sure all the other students who are at the school. Keep up the good work. Really good to hear. So thank you very much for your story and for sharing. You're more than welcome to come on the show again if ever you want to. And if listeners want to get in touch with you to hear more about your study, your research, or your work for true inclusion in education and the workplace, how might they do that?
They can contact me on LinkedIn. Probably the easiest place to find me.
Well, we'll put a link in the bio with the show when it goes out. So it's been wonderful listening and speaking with you today. So thank you very much, Simon, and best of luck with the MBA and the PhD.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. I'm Evalynne Charmer. This is Autistic Voices on UK Health Radio. And special thanks to our guest of the week.